Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're breaking down Saturday, December 16th slate of college football bowl games. Yes, it is finally that time of year. Bowl season has arrived, and we've got ourselves a 5-game slate on DraftKings on Saturday that look pretty solid, and it's a good opportunity to win us some money playing some DFS. And we are going to be here with you for the entirety of bowl season for the rest of the college football season. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, subscribe to the YouTube channel as well as to the audio feed on Spotify, Apple, or wherever else you get your podcasts. So that way you'll be notified when new episodes drop, because we are going to be doing episodes for the rest of college football bowl season as well as the rest of the NFL season, which will have an episode coming out later this week, and college basketball coming through the rest of the season as well. So if you hit that subscribe button, you will be notified when new episodes drop. We just hit 250 subscribers on YouTube, which is quite a milestone for us. So now the next milestone is 300. So if you have not already, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. All right, so we've got a 5-game slate to break down, which means there's 10 total teams playing on this slate. So we're going to give you a big overview of all 5 of the games, as well as where all 10 teams stand at the quarterback, running back, and wide receiver position. And we're going to do it in a way that is efficient, covering a lot of information in not a whole lot of time, and kind of giving you a very good overview of who to play and who not to play for this Saturday DFS slate. So without further ado, let's go ahead and break it down by taking a look at the board and looking at the 5 games themselves. All right, so which of these 5 bowl games are going to have the best game environment to target for our DFS lineups this Saturday? Well, we're going to go ahead and kind of rank them in order. The highest game total of the day is Jacksonville State versus Louisiana. That total is projected to be about 31-28 Jacksonville State. I always round to the nearest point because, when they get out there on the field, they can't score 0.25 a point. So 31-28 is going to be about the implied total in that one. And that one's kind of interesting to me because both these teams are very run-heavy teams. However, they both do operate at a fast tempo. So I'm guessing that tempo is going to kind of help pick the pace of this game up. Neither of these teams are elite defensively, so that one does end up with the highest total of the slate. The second highest total of Saturday is going to be the Independence poll. Cal taking on Texas Tech. That one is projected to be about 29-26 in favor of Texas Tech. Generally knowing how Texas Tech operates, that's not very shocking. In the middle of the 3 games is going to be the only other one with a total over 50, and that is New Mexico State taking on Fresno State in the New Mexico Bowl. That one has a total of 51.5 and is projected to be about 27-24 in favor of New Mexico State. Then you have UCLA taking on Boise in the LA Bowl, kind of a home field advantage for UCLA in that one. And that one's projected to be 26-22 in favor of UCLA. And then the worst game environment of the day is the Cure Bowl, which is Miami, Ohio taking on Appalachian State. App is 6.5 point favorites, and that one's projected to be 25-19. So definitely a big contrasting game environments, but still there's no games that I just want to sit here and totally cross off the list, or no teams that I'm just going to sit and cross off my list entirely. So all of these teams are live. All these games are live to get guys into your DFS lineups. So just who do you want in your DFS lineups? Well, let's go ahead and break down the quarterback position. So the top play of the day at the quarterback position to me is Diego Pavia of New Mexico State. He has been an elite option all season long. If you have been playing, the Tuesday and Wednesday night slates early in the season when Conference USA had those midweek games, he was elite then, and he still is elite. And one of the big reasons why he's elite is because of what he does on the ground. He scores about 10 fantasy points per game from rushing only, and he also is shown a high ceiling this season. He's had 3 games over 30 fantasy points on DraftKings. So Diego Pavia, high ceiling, high floor with that rushing, just an elite play for the Saturday slate. Now, while I'm here, I do want to mention, if you've ever listened to the college fantasy football podcast, Burning the Red Shirt, they are doing a bowl bash, they call it. And it is you basically like a DFS contest for bowl season, where you kind of get to pick your players and fill out your lineup, and you get to pick a lot of players, and it's for the entirety of bowl season. They run this contest. I played in it last year, just finished out of the money, and I really enjoy the format, really enjoy it. So, that one is available on Fantrax. If you want more information on it, reach out to me or just reach out to Burning the Red Shirt directly. But the bowl bash is one of the coolest contests that, exists in bowl season. And as you can see on my screen here, there's a few guys from Saturday's games that I've got in my lineup for the entirety of bowl season, and Diego Pavia is going to be one of them. I feel that strongly about what he's going to do on Saturday, as well as Cal's Jaden. More on him a little bit later, but the bowl bash is a really fun contest. I really recommend it. It's $32 to enter if you want to play in that. Now, Back to the rest of the quarterback position. So Joey Aguilar is Appalachian State's starting quarterback, and he got a huge price bump on DraftKings after their conference championship game against Troy, which is kind of odd because he really let everybody down and only scored 5 fantasy points in that entire game. Big reason why is because of the turnovers. He lost 2 fumbles in that game. Now, that was just his second game of the season under 22 fantasy points. So Joey Aguilar has been pretty darn consistent all season long, and that was just kind of one blip on the radar. However, I don't think this game environment is a great one for Appalachian State. We mentioned how this is the lowest game total of the day. Miami of Ohio is going to run the ball quite a lot, and they're going to play at a slow tempo while they're running the ball. So you're just not going to see as much volume or as much opportunities for Appalachian State in this one. And App has only implied 25 points. So just looking at Aguilar's game log, when App has only scored 25 or less points, he has totals of 5.1, 25.9, 23.8, and 8 fantasy points when App is under 25. So just kind of a mixed bag there. I kind of think his ceiling is a little bit capped because of the game environment. Now, Mikey Keene is just a strange like profile with his game log because of how many games he left early or came in late a few times. So just a weird game log. You can't really go by it. For me, he's only interesting to me as a game stack. Like if I want to game stack this New Mexico State Fresno State game, he is going to be a guy that I would play on the other side of Diego Pavia. He does have 2 games this season over 30 fantasy points, so he does have a legitimate ceiling, but there's just not a whole lot of substance there in the rest of the game. Now, Baron Morton is Texas Tech starter, but he is not a guy that I'm going to be super intrigued to play. We did mention how Texas Tech does have the second highest team total on the slate at 29 points, but I just don't really like the price tag here on Baron Morton. At $8,000, you need at least 3x that number to get value in DFS contests, right? So if he's $8,000, you want at least 24 fantasy points, and he has only hit that number twice so far this season, and his ceiling has been about 27 fantasy points. So I just really, it's not that I don't like him as a play. I don't like his price tag on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I think he's a little more palatable, but I just still think that there's better plays in terms of a points per dollar basis than Baron Morton. Meanwhile, you got Chandler Fields, who is the third string quarterback who has been starting for UL Lafayette, the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. And he's only started 3 games. So don't be fooled by his average on DraftKings because 2 of those are games where he came in relief late. But in 3 games that he started, he scored 18, 22, and 27.6 fantasy points. So you're looking at a guy who has legitimate upside, cheaper than Baron Morton in a game environment that's going to be very profitable. Chandler Fields is a guy who is definitely going to make my lineups. And then, kind of alternating here with guys that I like and don't like. Ethan Garbers is an interesting guy for me. I was really all over him in the USC game when he was only $6,400, and I thought that he was a really solid play then. He got you 18.9 fantasy points, which wasn't bad. But right now, he's at $7,400 in an ugly game environment, and he hasn't scored more than 23 fantasy points all season. So Ethan Garbers is probably going to be a pass for me. Now, Zion Webb is a guy that I will be getting behind. So we mentioned how this Jacksonville State Louisiana game does have the highest total of the slate. Zion Webb is a big-time dual threat player. He gets most of his fantasy points from rushing, not passing, and that gives him a legitimate ceiling. He's had 4 games this season over 30 fantasy points at only $7,000. If you're playing GPPs, he's definitely a guy that you have to have in your lineups because of what he gives you in terms of that upside from rushing the football. Now let's talk about the last kind of regular starter on here, which is going to be Fernando Mendoza. To me, he's interesting because of that price tag at only $6,200. He just has such a lesser goal to get to than a Baron Morton or than an Ethan Garbers because of his salary. At only $6,200, he gets you 19 fantasy points. You're going to be okay with that. And, he's played 7 games this season, and he's hit 3 times value for his current salary in 3 of them. He had a ceiling of 36 fantasy points against USC. Granted, Texas Tech's defense a little bit better than USC, but, you've got a guy down here way low in the price tag that is going to unlock a lot of value for your running back and wide receiver positions if you go to him, and he's got a significantly lower goal than a lot of the other quarterbacks. Now, for Miami, Ohio, their starter this season, Brett Gabbert, will not be coming back in this one. And their starter for most of the season, Avion Smith, is already in the transfer portal. So Henry Hessen appears to be their starter. Since Avion Smith took over, this team went really run heavy. Not a whole lot of passing volume at all. Like you can see, the most pass attempts that Avion Smith attempted in a game was 24. Most of the time, it was in between 16 and 17 passes in a game. And I just don't think that's going to give enough passing volume volume for a guy who started the season as a third string quarterback to be a viable DFS play. Boise is also with their third string quarterback. Mason Madsen, or Maddox Madsen, excuse me, is out for the season. Taywin Green is in the transfer portal. So CJ Tiller is going to be the guy. I don't know very much about him at all. What I do know is that he's only $4,500. So if you're looking to kind of make a dart throw at the quarterback position and maybe he ends up being good, like it's worth a shot. That price tag gives him a goal of only 18 fantasy points to get 4x value and only 13 and a half fantasy points to get 3x value. So I definitely think that there's a very legitimate argument to be made for playing CJ Tiller just because of that price tag. All right, that does it for the quarterback position. So let's go ahead and take a quick breather and then let's talk about the running backs. Now, before we get started with the running backs, I do want to mention there are a few places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on X at Mike's Money Picks. I tweet out the DFS rundown for every college basketball and college football slate where I highlight all of my kind of favorite categorical plays. And then if there's any injury news that kind of changes my opinion on guys, I do try to get it out there. And then, if there's any updates with the podcast or anything, new episodes or, episodes that are audio only or stuff like that, I do try to get it out there on X as well. And then I also just answer any lineup questions that you have for me. Like, I'm pretty good about just answering, if you reach out to me, I would gladly answer you on X. Also, I'm in the Fantasy Corner Discord. The link is in the description below. I highly recommend that. We've got a lot of smart people in there who play a lot of DFS for a lot of different sports, college football, college basketball, NBA, NFL. It's all in there. And we've got kind of players of all levels and all different types that, all bouncing ideas off each other, all talking about plays and then sweating it out together. It's a lot of fun. It's a really fun community to be a part of. It's 100% free. And if you're interested in talking DFS with more people looking to build a community, I highly recommend it. And then lastly, I do write up a full article every college football slate and college basketball slate where I highlight all of my core plays as well as kind of my lineup strategy and attack strategy for the slate. It's available on my Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. And I'm not going to say that, you're instantly going to, get those core plays and win GPPs. It's not that easy, but I guarantee you that you can read those, get a lot of information, a lot of insight in how to kind of build out your strategy and build out, kind of your way that you want to attack and play DFS. Lastly, if you're looking to try something new this bowl season, head on over to signupexpert.com/Mike's Picks. We are partnered with SignUpExpert, and what they do is they give you the best offers and promo codes on any DFS, player prop, or sportsbook site. So if you are looking to try out something new, maybe Underdog, is on there. Jock Market is on there as well. So if you're looking to try something new, get yourself a good offer, good promo code, signupexpert.com/Mike's Picks. All right, so let's go ahead now and talk about the running back position. So just looking at the slate as a whole, this is going to be a slate where I will be playing 3 running backs. I will be playing my normal 2 running backs, and then I will be most likely playing a running back in the flex position as opposed to a wide receiver. I think there's a lot of good plays at the running back position. I think that there's a lot more safety in a lot of these running backs than pretty much anybody that you can play at the wide receiver position. If you're playing cash games, I certainly think you almost have to go 3 running backs just to guarantee that you're going to get a lot of safety and give yourself a high floor, because there's not a lot of wide receivers on this slate that have any kind of floor to speak of. More of that when we get to the wide receiver position. But anyway, that was just kind of my spiel on lineup construction. Now, what running backs you're going to fill out those lineups? Well, at the very top of the board, you've got Ashton Jeanty of Boise State, who is coming back to Boise for 2024, which was kind of surprising because I kind of felt like he could transfer up somewhere and really improve his draft stock. But anyway, he's sitting at $8,500 on this slate. He's been absolutely electric this season. Multiple games over 40 fantasy points, multiple games where he's won a lot of people a lot of money on DFS. And he is sharing a backfield with George Holani. These 3 guys have kind of been back together for the last 3 weeks, and Boise is just determined to run the football. Last week in their conference championship game against UNLV, both Jeanty and Holani, both top 20 plus carries, and both of them are playing in this game. There's no transfer portaling. There's no opting out. Both these guys are going to be active, so you got to figure with a third string quarterback coming in, both of these guys are going to see a lot of run here in this game, right? The only problem is that UCLA is one of the best rush defenses in all of college football. They only give up 2.3 yards per carry on the ground, which is the 3rd best rate in the nation behind only Penn State and James Madison. So kind of if you're looking at Jeanty and Holani, like that kind of makes them volume and touchdown dependent plays. I don't think they're going to be able to rack up a whole lot of yards against this UCLA defense. Kind of with the carry load being between the 2 of them, my default would be to let me rephrase. The carry load has kind of been about 50-50 between the two of them. And so that would kind of make me want to lean Helani because you get $2,000 worth of savings. However, Jonty has simply been better. He's been more efficient, and he is the one that is involved in the passing game. So, Jonty's caught 8 passes in the last 3 games. So I think Jonty is probably the better play. It also means he's likely going to be the higher owned play. So I think between the two of them, Helani is probably the guy that you would want to target, as a leverage play, as a guy who's a pivot off of Jonty. And in GPPs, I think that they're both in play. I'm probably not going to have a whole lot of them, though. With just going up against that tough UCLA rush defense, there's other guys I would rather target. One of those guys is Jade Knott. I mentioned the Bowl Bash earlier. He is a guy that I am currently have in my lineup in the Bowl Bash for all of bowl season. He's a guy that I feel pretty darn strongly about here in this game against Texas Tech. He has seen a ton of volume. I think he's the top running back on this slate, period. He's had 20-plus carries in 5 straight games, and he has been over 15 fantasy points in all 5 of those games, averaging about 27 fantasy points per game in that stretch. The worst game that he had in that stretch was 15 fantasy points against UCLA, which kind of builds my case that you don't want to target this UCLA rush defense. Texas Tech is a rush defense that you want to target. That we've seen teams run all over them, and they give up 4.5 yards per carry on the season. So if Jaden Knott is guaranteed 20 carries and Texas Tech gives up 4.5 yards per carry, then, I'm no math expert. Actually, I kind of am. I'm a high school math teacher. That extrapolates out to 90 yards for Jaden Knott. So if he gets more than 20 carries or if he busts a long run, then you're really looking at 100 yards, which gives you that 3-point bonus on DraftKings. And Cal is projected to score 26 points in this game. You got to feel like Jaden Knott is going to get in the end zone at least once. I think he is an elite play on this slate and on any slate right now because of how he's been playing in the matchup against Texas Tech. Now, on the other side, Taj Brooks is no slouch either. His workload is pretty similar to Jaden Knott. He's had 17 carries in every single game since week 2, and back then he was sharing a backfield. Now he is not. And he's at least 12 fantasy points in every single game this season. He has a legitimately super high floor. In fact, his worst game in the last 2 months came against Texas, who is one of the best front sevens in all of college football. And Cal is not one of the best front sevens in all of college football. So Taj Brooks, you're looking at a guy who has a super high floor because of that workload and a decent matchup against Cal. I would not mind playing both Jaden Knott and Taj Brooks against each other and just hoping that neither of these teams' run defenses show up and just they're both scoring long rushing touchdowns back to back to back. Malik Sherrod is interesting for Fresno State because he gets a smaller workload than the two we just mentioned, than Brooks and Ott, but he's explosive. He breaks off long runs, and that gives him a really high ceiling. We've seen him this season have 4 games over 26 fantasy points, and at a guy that's only $6,800, that's some pretty big savings over Jaden Knott and Taj Brooks. And so I think if you're playing GPPs this weekend, I think Sherrod is a guy that you've got to target and just, hope that maybe he does break off one of those long runs against New Mexico State, who just gave up over 200 rushing yards to Liberty in the conference championship game. So Malik Sherrod's definitely a guy who's going to be on my radar. I don't think he's like as rock solid lock of a play like Jaden Knott or Taj Brooks, but he's got a lot of upside and he comes in at a cheaper salary. He's definitely a guy who's going to make my player pool. Speaking of guys that are going to make my player pool, Rashad Amos of Miami, Ohio. So he's a guy I like a lot. Appalachian State's run defense has just been kind of dreadful this season. They give up 5.1 yards per carry on the season, and they just gave up 50 fantasy points to Troy's Kamani Vidal in the Sun Belt Championship game. Now, that really bodes well for Rashad Amos because, his workload hasn't been super duper great, but this is a team with a really high rush rate and they're going with their 3rd string quarterback now. So if Miami, Ohio is going to score, then it's likely going to be because of Rashad Amos. In fact, he's been pretty good over the last half of the season. He's had over 20 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games. He scored over 8 touchdowns. He scored exactly 8 touchdowns in that span. So Rashad Amos, a guy that I find very likely to reach the end zone, and I think it's a really, really solid matchup against App State. If you can't pay up for Ott or Brooks, I definitely think paying down to Amos is an option. Now, Jacksonville State has a running back committee right now between Malik Jackson and Anwar Lewis. Look, it's one of the highest projected, games of the day. I think it is the highest projected scoring game of the day. Jacksonville State is favored in it. Should be a pretty good environment for their running back, but I just don't really know who it's going to be. If it looks like they're going to be splitting carries, and so I don't think that gives you any kind of safety when there's a whole lot of backs that are just slightly more expensive than them, who I find is a whole lot of safer plays. Now, UCLA is a little bit interesting because of Carson Steele being questionable. He has apparently not been spotted at practice, and so I don't know what the deal is with that situation, but they've been in a committee all year, Carson Steele and TJ Harden. And so if Carson Steele is out for this game and TJ Harden gets the full workload to himself, you could see a big time game for TJ Harden. Boise's run defense is no slouch, but if TJ Harden is getting 100% of the workload, he is a guy who definitely gives you a lot of upside. In a pretty similar situation last year when Zach Charbonnet declared for the draft, TJ Harden saw a really big workload in the Sun Bowl and made a lot of people a lot of money in DFS. Kanye Roberts is the new starter for App State, with Nate Noel going to miss this game. In fact, he's gotten the start in each of the last two games. I actually don't think he was the technical starter in the Georgia State game, or Georgia Southern game, excuse me. But he did get the lion's share of the carries, so I would consider him the RB1. So he's had 20 fantasy points in each of his last two games. Miami, Ohio, not a slouch defensively, but $5,200 for a starting running back is not bad. And it definitely gives you the ability to pay up at the quarterback position with two guys that you like at quarterback if you're going down to Kanye Roberts at running back. All right, that does it for the running back position. So let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then let's talk about the wide receivers. So like I mentioned during the running back segment, this is a pretty bleak slate for the wide receiver position. I am always a proponent of stacking your wide receivers with your quarterback, and I think this slate is going to be no different. The only exception is if you are playing Diego Pavia or Zion Webb of Jacksonville State. I think those two guys, because of how much they run, do not need to be stacked. But this slate, there's very few wide receivers that I'm really all that interested in on their own as one-off plays. So a lot of them I will be playing will be stacked with my quarterback, and just hoping that, if the quarterback's going off, then it's going to carry the wide receiver to be going off as well, because there's really not a whole lot of wide receivers on this slate that have really intriguing game logs, really intriguing stat profiles that I'm really excited about targeting. So that's just kind of my thoughts on the wide receiver position on the slate. So now let's go ahead and dive into each team and kind of where they stand at the wide receiver position and who you should be stacking with your quarterback or who you should be targeting as a one-off. So starting with Fresno State, because they have the most expensive wide receivers on the slate. It's a little bit of a mess right now because you have got Jalen Moss, Eric Brooks, and Jalen Gill, and they're kind of all about the same in terms of their profile, in terms of what they've done this season, in terms of their ceiling performances and their lack of consistency. They're all about the same. But I'm really just not interested in any of them as a one-off play because they're the most expensive wide receivers on the slate, and they've given no kind of consistency. The good news is that back when Mikey Keene was the regular starter, all three of them gave ceiling performances, but good luck figuring out which one of them it's going to be. If I'm playing Mikey Keene, I'm going to take my shot with one of them, but I'm definitely not looking to play these guys as one-off plays or anything like that. Combined, these three guys average about 35 fantasy points per game. So I think that I'm really not even that intrigued in playing two or three of them. If I'm playing Mikey Keene, I'm probably just going to stack one of them and hope that that one guy goes off, as opposed to trying to play all three of these expensive wide receivers and limit myself at the running back position in my second quarterback. So Fresno State's probably not a team that I'm super interested in targeting. Now, for New Mexico State, I'm even less interested. They really haven't had any receivers exhibit any kind of consistency all season long, except for Jonathan Brady. So to me, he would be the primary stacking partner I would look at for Diego Pavia, and I really would probably just be dart throws for the other guys. If I'm playing a lot of lineups, like I've said in the past, I'm a 20 max kind of guy. If I'm playing 20 lineups and I'm playing 5 lineups with Pavia, I'm probably going to have 3 lineups with Brady and, sprinkle in some of the other guys elsewhere. But I'm really not that intriguing in this receiving core, and I think that you can play Diego Pavia unstacked. Texas Tech is an interesting one because they've had some transfers out. They're one of the highest projected scoring teams of the slate. So, with Texas Tech projected to score 29 points, if you're not playing Taj Brooks, you're probably going to want to play some of these wide receivers or Baron Morton, right? Because they're going to score points. And so if you don't think that it's going to be the running back, then it's got to be one of the wide receivers, because I don't think this team is going to get shut out. Now, they have had some transfers out. And so what that's turned into is you've got a starting three receivers now of Eakin, White, and McCray. Coy Eakin was Baron Morton's high school teammate. I believe I have that correct. And so he's had some real chemistry with Morton since Morton became the starter. He's been their leader in targets down the stretch of the season. However, it has not really panned out into being like a big time ceiling game. He's only hit double digit fantasy points 3 times all season. And it's just not been like a super prolific role, even though he has had that chemistry with Morton. I mean, he's probably the best Texas Tech wide receiver to play in a cash game, but I lack kind of the upside there. Xavier White is kind of more of the same. Like, he's had 3 games this season over double digits. He's kind of more of a big play guy than Coy Eakin, so he would probably be more of a GPP type target. Dre McCray is at a really affordable price. Hasn't really done a whole lot this season, but at a price tag of only $3,500, now in a starting role, I could totally see myself getting to him at that affordable price. There's a lot of wide receivers on this slate that because of transfers out are going to be in an increased role and are at a very cheap price tag. So I definitely think that that could be a really solid source of value here on this Saturday slate. Now, on the Cal side of things from this game, again, this is a team that's projected to score 26 points according to Vegas. So if you're not going to be playing Jade Knott, then you need to be looking at some of the receivers, right? So to me, they're a little bit easier to target than either of the 2 teams we talked about so far. Jeremiah Hunter is their clear wide receiver 1. I think you can make the argument that he is the best wide receiver play on the entire slate. He's had 4 games over 18 fantasy points this season with a ceiling of 33 against UCLA. He's kind of just the clear alpha receiver on this entire slate. I really get the argument in playing him. If I'm not playing Jade in a lineup, I will likely be playing Jeremiah Hunter. Now, Tron Grizel is the clear wide receiver 2. He could be kind of an ownership pivot off of Jeremiah Hunter. He does have a game this season of over 30 fantasy points, so he does have some legitimate upside, but I do think Hunter has the better overall profile. Now, their wide receiver 3, Taj Davis, has left the football program, which appears to be putting Monroe Young in a position to start. He's only $3,100 on DraftKings, hasn't really done much this season, but $3,100, he's going to be a starter. Like there's a chance for something there. So if you're playing some of the Cal guys, I definitely see an argument for playing Monroe Young at 3,100. If you're building out a Cal Texas Tech game stack, I definitely see the argument for playing either Monroe Young or Dre McCray on either side of it and hoping that game shoots out and one of those guys happens to catch a touchdown. I think that could be a really solid source of value is getting to one of those 2 guys on this slate. Now for Jacksonville State. I mentioned them earlier as a candidate that I don't think you need to stack their quarterback with their wide receivers, and Perry Carter is their wide receiver number 1. He's the only one that I would really consider playing. Has 2 games this season over 20 fantasy points, so he's shown us a legitimate ceiling. He's really the only one that I would consider playing with Zion Webb. I think other than him, you can play Zion Webb unstacked, and I'm really probably not going to play much of the other Jacksonville State guys. On the Louisiana side, they're a little bit interesting because Peter LeBlanc is their highest priced wide receiver. And he's been pretty solid throughout the season. Like, he's had some big games. He had one over 27. He had other games in double digits. But the better profile to me is Jacob Bernard, who actually has more catches and more yards on the season than LeBlanc, who just hasn't really found the end zone. Bernard's only scored 1 touchdown all season, which makes it really hard to accumulate a lot of fantasy points. But if he's going to lead them in catches and lead them in yards, then I've got to hope that there's going to be some touchdown regression in play in a game that's implied for almost 60 points according to Las Vegas. So Jacob Bernard is definitely in play for me. And if I'm playing any receiver for Louisiana, it's going to be Jacob Bernard. And if I'm playing Chandler Fields at quarterback, it's going to be stacking him with Jacob Bernard. Next up, we got the Miami, Ohio, and App State game, and I got to be real honest, I'm not targeting any Miami, Ohio wide receivers. This offense got really, really run-heavy with Avion Smith, who was their second-string quarterback, and now they're down to their third-string quarterback. So what do you think they're going to do? I think they're just going to continue to run the football very heavily like they have the last 6 weeks of the season. And so Larvadain is kind of their wide receiver 1. He really didn't produce a whole lot with Avion Smith under center. So I really don't have a whole lot of high hopes for him with the third string quarterback. But if you were to play any of them, he is the guy who is their leading wide receiver. And then also you do have Cade McDonald, who is I believe he is their tight end, who is going to be out there on the field. But, they don't throw the ball a whole lot, and that's kind of not really a great situation to target. Now, on the App State side of things, they have a very interesting dynamic here. They are very easy to target, though. It's three guys with App that I want to target: Robinson, Horn, and Wilson. So, which one? Well, Christian Horn started the season as their wide receiver one, and he kind of got banged up. He got hurt after the Southern Miss game and missed a few weeks, and he was back for the Georgia Southern game, scored a touchdown in that game, and then not a terrible showing against Troy, 5 for 42, which was 9.2 fantasy points. But he's no longer pretty much operating as their wide receiver one since he returned from injury. That guy has been Caden Robinson, who in the 2 games since Christian Horn returned from injury, Caden Robinson has had 8 catches and 6 catches in those 2 games, 33.8 and 13 fantasy points in those 2 games. He's outcaught Christian Horn 14-7 in those 2 games since Horn returned from injury. So it appears that Caden Robinson has taken this wide receiver one role from Christian Horn. However, he got a full 2 weeks to heal whatever injury that was ailing him. So Christian Horn could be a guy who is back in play, but I'm definitely interested in primarily those 2 in the App State wide receiver room. And then you also have Eli Wilson, who is the clear third option in the passing game. He recovered a fumble for a touchdown against Troy, which kind of saved his day, but that makes it 3 straight double-digit games for Eli Wilson. So those 3 guys, the good news is it's pretty concentrated with App State. I think all 3 of those guys make solid cash game targets because they're going to be out on the field. This team is going to throw the football, and it's going to be those 3 guys. Like, there's a lot of teams on this slate that don't really have a lot of certainty, and they are one of them that does. Now, for UCLA, Logan Loya is by and large the guy I want to target for them. He is probably the most likely guy that I would play as a one-off play at the wide receiver position. And the reason why is because he commands such a big target share in this UCLA offense that I could see Loya giving you a really solid fantasy performance without Ethan Garbers giving you a really solid fantasy performance. Because think about it, a wide receiver, 88 yards and 1 touchdown. That's what? Well, Loya just did that. It's 23.8 fantasy points with 9 catches as well. Ethan Garbers, 88 yards and a touchdown is 7 fantasy points. So I really think that Loya is a guy that I'm really willing to target as a one-off. And if you're looking at the course of the whole season, in games that Ethan Garbers has started, he's been pretty solid. Like Logan Loya, he's been over 12.9 fantasy points in 3 straight games, double-digit targets in 2 straight games. He has a profile that profiles really well. And even though this game environment against Boise is probably not going to be great, UCLA is probably not going to do a whole lot of scoring. Just the amount of targets that he commands is going to make him a very intriguing play. Now, J. Michael Sturdivant would probably be the pivot off of Logan Loya, or if you're looking to just stack up the UCLA receiving core, he'd be a guy that you can do it with. He is still playing a ton of snaps. Ever since Garbers took over under center, he is not seeing as much targets as he did with their previous quarterbacks, but he's still out there. He's still running routes, and he's still a solid college football player. He was really good at Cal a year ago. So he's a guy that I'd be willing to play in or out of a stack, but I would much rather play Loya. Loya does have the better profile. After those 2, it's kind of a mess. You've got a lot of transfers out in this receiving core, and a lot of guys that kind of play on a rotational basis. Kyle Ford kind of figures to be the next in line. He was decent against Cal. He had 4 catches for 51 yards. He would probably be the next guy I'll be wanting to play, but there's just not a whole lot of certainty there. And so, on a slate like this where you got 5 games, you only have to play 3 wide receivers. Don't play a guy that you're not going to be super certain about unless you're playing a GPP and you're hoping to catch a guy really low owned with some upside, in which case Cal Ford at $3,500 might be one of those guys. Now, on the Boise side of things, their receiving core has just been a train wreck ever since the middle of the season when you had an injury to Caples and then you had McAllister transferring out mid-season. And it's just kind of been a mess in their receiving room. It's why you kind of see Ashton Jonty be involved in the passing game so much because they didn't really trust to throw to their wide receivers. And that was what Taylor Green was doing. He was just dumping it off to Jonty and letting him go from there. So anyway, they've kind of solved this mess a little bit. In the last few weeks, Matt Lauder, Billy Bowens, and Austin Bolt have been the 3 guys who have been playing. Those have been the 3 guys that have been on the field for the highest percentage of snaps. Now, they've had kind of different roles throughout. So Austin Bolt has been the big play guy. He caught a 57-yard touchdown against UNLV. He had a 42-yard catch against New Mexico. It would not shock me to see him catch a deep touchdown against UCLA. He's only $3,000. There's certainly worse punt plays you can make than Austin Bolt. Billy Bowens has the best overall profile, in my opinion. In terms of the consistency of his snap share, he was playing all season long, as opposed to, some of these guys like Bolt who really just started playing recently. He had 4 for 91 last week. Billy Bowens did against UNLV. So I definitely think he's a really solid play at only $3,300. And then Lauder is just kind of there. Like he's up in price in DraftKings ahead of Bowens and Lauder, or Bowens and Bolt, not by much, but he is there. He's probably the most likely of the group to catch a touchdown, but he's not really super appealing. What I do worry about though is that Chase Penry could end up being healthy for this game. We don't really know his status just yet. I would expect him to play ahead of one of those wide receivers. I don't know which one. And then you've also got the freshman Prince Strachan, who has looked pretty promising in the season when he's been out there and seen snaps. With it being a bowl game and with this season kind of being, at its end, do they go to, a freshman who's looked good over the course of the season? I don't know. I don't think there's a whole lot of certainties in this Boise receiving room at all. With their quarterback being only $4,500, that saves you a lot of salary, and I don't really think you need to stack him. Even though one of these wide receivers, like say you wanted to stack the quarterback with Bowens, like that's a super cheap stack with the quarterback at 4,500 and Billy Bowens at 3,300, and that would give you a lot of flexibility for the rest of your lineup. You'd be able to pay up for your second quarterback, able to get all the running backs that you wanted. So I think that'd be an interesting strategy, but I don't think it is something you need to do. And if I was to pick one receiver out of the Boise group, it would probably be Billy Bowens, with a little bit of Austin Bolt as well because of his big play capability. All right, that does it for the wide receiver position, and that does it for our first preview of bowl season. So remember, if you want more from me, follow me on X at Mike's Money Picks. The link to the Fantasy Corner Discord is in the description. I will be in there talking up this college football slate as well as college basketball for the rest of the week and until the rest of the season. 100% recommend that. Articles are on the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. All the offers and promo codes, signupexpert.com/Mike's Picks if you want to try something new. And remember, give a shot to the Burning the Red Shirt Bowl Bash contest. It's $32 to enter. Reach out to me if you have any questions about finding, or reach out to them directly, the Burning the Red Shirt podcast. They do a lot of good work over there. And I really enjoy this contest that they're putting out. So, this is the first one for bowl season, y'all. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you like what you saw in the video today, hit the like button. It really helps me out a lot. It helps the videos get noticed. And we're going to be back for the rest of bowl season. So if you hit that subscribe button, you will be notified on the audio feed and on the YouTube channel when we come out with our next college football bowl season preview. So that does it for this episode, guys. Hopefully I was able to give you guys some good information that will help you win the first week of bowl season. And we will be back for the rest of bowl season. So thank you guys for watching and listening, and I will see you next time.